Today, I'd like to talk to you about something that poor people always do, and rich people never do. A lot of people dream about becoming wealthy, but at the same time, they engage in behaviors that will never make them rich. Many people ask, what do I need to do to become wealthy? The truth is, before anything else, you need to stop doing what poor people do. That's the fastest way to start building real wealth. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. In this video, I've put together 9 habits. 9 things that poor people consistently do, and wealthy people never do. And it doesn't matter what nationality you are or what country you're from. This pattern holds true all around the world. Poor people do these things all the time, rich people never do. Let's dive right into it.
1. Living beyond their means.
This is something poor people almost always do. They live beyond their means. That's when people buy things they simply can't afford. I honestly don't understand those who buy cars on credit, or even worse, who take out loans to throw weddings or big parties. This is a direct road to poverty and financial struggle. Wealthy people, on the other hand, avoid this. One of the key reasons they became wealthy is because they learned how to live within their means. Now, why do poor people live beyond their means? Let's take weddings or buying cars on credit as an example. It's because poor people often chase someone else's goals. They want to keep up with the Joneses, to have what others have. That's the first big mistake. If you want to stop being poor, the first step is define your own goals and follow them, not someone else's. And your real goal is to become wealthy, not to buy a car or throw an expensive wedding on credit. The second reason poor people live beyond their means is because they don't understand the true cost of ownership. Let me explain with a simple example. You buy a car for, say, $50,000. Poor people think that's the total cost. But in reality, $50,000 is just the starting point. After that, you have to pay taxes, maintenance costs, spare parts, gas, oil changes, and so on.
It adds up fast.
Whenever you buy something, always ask yourself, what is the real cost of owning this item? 2. Poor people focus on saving, rich people focus on investing. This is a massive difference, and it's the same everywhere around the globe. If you only focus on cutting expenses, it creates a kind of downward spiral. By constantly reducing your spending, strangely enough, you'll eventually end up reducing your income too. That's why there's a famous quote often attributed to Rockefeller. Don't be afraid of big expenses. Be afraid of small incomes. And that's exactly the mindset rich people live by. Poor people try to save and stash money away, maybe in a savings account. Rich people, on the other hand, are always looking for ways to invest. These are 2 completely different strategies. Remember, nobody has ever become rich by saving money in a deposit account. Nobody has ever become wealthy just by pinching pennies. All wealthy people got there by increasing their income and growing their assets. 3. A refusal to learn and grow. In most cases, poverty isn't something random or unfair. More often than not, poverty is actually the result of certain personal flaws. Like pride believing you already know everything. Laziness not wanting to learn new skills. Or envy resenting what others have but refusing to work for your own success. Another key difference I've noticed, everywhere, in every country, is that wealthy people are almost always those who are constantly growing and developing. And here's something interesting. It's often not even a matter of character, it's about being active. Rich people are usually very active. Because of their high level of activity, they take a lot of action. Because they take a lot of action, they also make a lot of mistakes and experience many failures. And mistakes and failures are the main drivers of personal growth. It's very possible that wealthy people become successful not because they're so special, but because they're active enough to make many mistakes, and smart enough to learn from them. Poor people, on the other hand, tend to avoid risks. They often don't want to invest time or energy into learning and developing new skills. This could be because of certain negative character traits, or simply because they don't want to step out of their comfort zone and take risks. 4. Staying stuck in the same environment. Here's another thing I've observed. Successful people constantly change and upgrade their environment. They're always meeting new people. They attend exhibitions, conferences, forums, you name it. They're not afraid to introduce themselves to strangers and expand their network. Poor people, however, tend to stay trapped in the same small circles. They often feel insecure, shy, or afraid to approach others. And it makes sense, this usually stems from low self-esteem. They worry, what if I go up to someone and they reject me? Or what if I embarrass myself?
But here's the deeper reason. It's pride.
Pride won't allow them to risk rejection, because rejection hurts their ego too much. It feels deeply personal and painful. If you recognize any of this in yourself, here's what you need to do. Crush it immediately. Make it a rule. If you want to become wealthy, you must be willing to meet new people. You must not be afraid to approach strangers. You must not fear rejection. In fact, overcoming the fear of rejection is one of the very first skills that salespeople are trained on. Because if you can't handle hearing no, you'll never be able to sell anything to anyone. 5. Living only for today. Poor people usually act reactively. First something happens, then they react to it. They spend their lives constantly solving one crisis after another, one emergency after another. It's like being stuck on a hamster wheel, running but getting nowhere. They don't take the time to plan long term. And here's the kicker. If you don't find time to plan, you will never magically have time later. Planning has to be intentional, you have to make it a priority. I've noticed that poor people tend to have extremely short planning horizons, if they have any plans at all. Very often, they don't plan for the future in any meaningful way. In contrast, wealthy people always have clear goals and long-term plans. Not just vague ideas, detailed, actionable long-term strategies. 6. Focusing on problems instead of opportunities. Poor people tend to fixate on their problems. They can't rise above the issue to see the bigger picture. And they definitely struggle to spot opportunities hidden inside the problems. Here's the mindset shift. Whenever you encounter a problem, don't rush to get upset. Instead, immediately ask yourself, okay, this is a problem, but what opportunities does it bring? Keep your focus not on the problem itself, but on solving it, and on finding the hidden doors it might be opening for you. I've noticed that wealthy people instinctively do this. Wealthy people have a different mindset. In every problem, they look for an opportunity. Of course, the seriousness of the problem doesn't just disappear. But they understand that behind almost every challenge, there's a hidden opportunity. In fact, in Islam, it's taught that with every trial, Allah always sends a blessing. A problem is a test, and every test comes with some kind of benefit. So train yourself to find the good in every difficulty, in every hardship you face. If you agree with this principle, smash that like button. And let's keep going. 7. Fear of taking risks. Poor people usually aren't willing to take risks. And sure, it makes sense on the surface. They already have limited resources, so what can they afford to gamble with? But if you flip the situation around, you'll see that if you have very little to lose, you should actually be taking more risks, not fewer. Because there's not much at stake, and a lot to gain. There's another critical point. Poor people misunderstand risk. They see risk as the possibility of losing something. Wealthy people see risk as the opportunity to gain something big. Same situation, completely different perspective. Learn to take smart risks. Not reckless, random risks, smart ones. There are two key qualities of a good risk. It has a high chance of success. It offers a big reward if it pays off. You should focus on taking high probability, high return risks. Think back. Surely there's been a time in your life when you took a risk. It paid off, and it felt amazing. Go back and analyze that moment. Was the risk calculated? Was the likelihood of success pretty good? Learn from your past wins. And then repeat those patterns. And hey, feel free to share your story about a risk you took and won in the comments. 8. Blaming others for their problems. Another major habit I've seen in poor people. They're always blaming someone else or something else for their problems. It could be the weather. It could be traffic. It could be shortages. The government. The boss. The neighbor. You name it. There's always some external excuse. Here's the real issue with that mentality. If you always blame others, you have no reason to change yourself. Because, hey, it's not your fault, right? And if you're not changing, you're stuck. You'll keep running in circles, trapped in the same problems over and over again. When you take full responsibility for your life, everything changes. Example. If you get caught in the rain and get soaked, don't blame the weather. Say, it's my fault. I didn't bring a raincoat or an umbrella. That simple shift leads immediately to the next, critical question. What can I do differently next time? That's the very beginning of self-development. So no matter what happens to you, no matter how unfair or unlucky it seems, never blame others. Take ownership. And always ask yourself, what can I do to prevent this from happening again? 9. Wasting time and energy. Unfortunately, Poor people often waste their most valuable resources: their time, their energy, and their attention. They don't value these resources enough. So they end up spending hours, days, or even years on meaningless activities. They leak energy on things that don't move them forward. Poor people often waste hours every day, scrolling endlessly through social media, watching random videos, laughing at memes, binging on TikTok, gossiping, and just killing time with pointless conversations. Even those who think they aren't wasting time often still don't value their time, energy, or focus highly enough. And that's exactly what keeps them stuck.
So, what's the solution?
Learn to truly value your time, energy, and attention.
Now, let's be clear.
Valuing your time doesn't mean arrogantly telling employers, "I'm too good for this job." If you do that without proving your value, you might just end up unemployed. What I'm talking about is this. Instead of wasting your time, energy, and attention on nonsense, start investing those precious resources into self-development. Invest them into learning new skills, gaining knowledge, and building your abilities. When you spend your time, energy, and attention on becoming better, those investments eventually pay off through better opportunities,
Better jobs. And a much better life.
Of course, all the steps we've talked about today require effort. But hey, nobody said life was supposed to be an easy walk in the park. There's an old saying: living life is not like crossing an open field. If you don't want to stay stuck where you are, you have to do what successful people do.
And remember,
This isn't just about money. It's about life itself. It's about growing, evolving, and not being stuck in the same miserable spot forever. But if you truly are happy and content where you are, if you're genuinely satisfied with your current life, then keep doing what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, our ultimate goal isn't money. It's to live a happy, meaningful life.